Hello and welcome to another afternoon session with your host, me. Hi, I'm Neil. I'm an expert sometimes, especially when you're talking about contracting and IT and all things like that. So today, what we're talking about? Well, it's not my haircut. We're going to talk about becoming a contractor. So I might have told some of you before, but I've got a book coming out about how to be a confident contractor. And so in there, I discuss lots of gubbins. And so let's have a summary of those right now. So it doesn't happen by accident. You can't accidentally become a contractor in the same way that you can't accidentally become pregnant. You have to do some actions before those. And so what can you do? Well, it is a big step. I'm not going to lie. It takes a lot more effort to find a contract and set up a load of gubbins that we'll talk about in a moment in order to be a contractor. I was talking to one of my colleagues, Thomas, his name is, and he said that some people do go into contracting, but they treat it a little bit like being an employee. And unfortunately, that's just the first mistake that you can make. Being a contractor is not the same as being an employee. It's quite different in a large number of ways. In fact, the only thing that's the same is hopefully the high standard of work that you provide to your end customer. So having those skills of what you can market to your customer and them being in demand is the very first step. But that means you can get a job. That doesn't necessarily mean you become a contractor. So how to make that step into becoming a contractor? Well, in the same way that you have a job, you can update your CV. This is the first page that anyone would see. It's a summary of you, and they would consider that for a job or for contracts. But in the contracting world, it's a little bit more important to have a little bit more, juice on the bones, because their decision, you'll probably have some sort of interview. But if your experience is anything like mine, I've had an interview with somebody where they've already pretty much decided that they wanted to hire me. They just wanted to make sure that I wasn't objectionable, I don't know exactly what they were looking for, but they wanted to meet me in person to make sure that A, I'm a real person, B, that all the wonderful stuff they read on the CV is actually the same person that's sitting across the table from them. And then you need to cover those things anyway because of ID checks and fraud and all sorts of other things. So you want to make sure that your CV is good enough for somebody to make a decision to hire you straight away. And if it isn't, make some small improvements. You can have like a section on there that says, this is my latest project that I did. This is the problem that we were trying to solve, and this is my part in the solution to how we got rid of that problem for our customer. This demonstrates what you can do for the customer. And you can also put this online in other forms, have a website. If you're serious about being a contractor, you're going to have your own business. Treat it like a business. You'd expect your business to have a website. And therefore, your online profile could be the first step of having a LinkedIn to then linking into, pun intended, an actual website that demonstrates your ability, those projects, those customers you've worked for. And then once you've got a presence, once you've got a sales page, because that's essentially what a CV is, it's a sales page for you, what you can do. You then need to get that information out there because, again, things don't happen by accident. Nobody's going to stumble across your website. Nobody's going to stumble across your CV. Unless you're lying about drunk on a Friday night, probably not a good look if you're looking for jobs. That's the time when people are going to stumble over you. But how can we make it more purposeful? Well, we can network with contractors who might hear of other issues and problems that you can help with and other contracts that you could get involved with. And there's recruiters. There are 3 types of recruiters. I'm not going to talk about those 3 today, but the ones that we're interested in are the ones that specialize in contracts and want to speak to you. So there's lots of different ways of doing things, but if they can speak to you and understand what you can offer the customer, then they will vouch for you to their customers. As a hiring manager, because I've had both hats on, I occasionally get emails from recruiters saying, we have this person, they've got a very strong CV, and did you know they did this and this and this for their last customer? Are you interested in hiring them? Now, that's who you want to be representing you. So if you can network and introduce yourself to recruiters that are proactive like that, then they will find a contract for you. Hey, it's part of their job, right? And if you've got that one pager, that CV, that sales brochure that sells you, that makes their job easier. And then show it to the recruiters, and they will want to present you to their customers. Now, when you get to the next step, there's the contract. Now, the contract can be simple or straightforward, but they all have the same 7 basic things. And of those things, it's going to be where you need to be, what the consideration is, consideration for both parties, what you're going to do for your customer and what your customer is going to do for you. You'll also have in there such stuff like how the contract will come to an end. In a happy world, you've delivered the service, it's been for a fixed period of time, and then the contract ceases. The services have been delivered. On the other hand, something wonky might happen, and so you want your contract to specify what happens in those cases. What happens if they don't pay you? That's a breach of contract, right? So therefore you can kill the contract and sue them in the courts for the money if it's worthwhile. Or perhaps something unfortunate happens where you cannot deliver the service that you want to. You're one piece of a puzzle and it relies heavily on another piece that the customer promised that they would do, but without that in place you can't deliver your service. So technically you're in breach of your contract because you can't deliver, but it's based on the dependency of the customer. So some contracts cover that scenario as well. And then there's other reasons why you might want to cease the contract. Those are all covered in the contract, but there's certain regulations in there, so you can't have it too one-sided, and there's legalities in there that you need to cover, so that you must have insurance, for example. And then the conversation comes round to what the actual deliverables are. You're delivering a product or service to your customer, and they promise to pay you a specific remuneration or fee for delivering that service. Now, quite commonly in IT contracts that I've dealt with, most of them are, you're going to deliver this thing, this advice, this end product, and we will pay you a fixed day rate for however many days it takes you to deliver that product within this specific month time frame window. And it's up to you to negotiate what that day rate is. You could talk to a charity and you think, well, okay, I'd like to do some good, so as part of my contribution to that charity, I'm going to charge them a lower day rate. Of course, you've got the option of charging a higher day rate, but you need to understand what their budget is. Now, they might tell you that budget is the problem. Quite often it isn't, and you can work around that. As long as you know that you provide value and they know that you provide the value. We're back to that one sheet again, aren't we? That sells you. They need to make the decision that they want to hire you before you even have this conversation. If they've already decided that they need you, then you can negotiate a higher rate. Once the contract's running, of course, the contract is signed, you are then in a position where you need to prepare the financial management. So I tell you what I mean by that is that day one, you will still need to eat and pay rent and stuff. And this is whilst delivering the products to the customer. Have you got enough personal funds in order to make sure that you are able to operate for the amount of time that it will take for your customer to firstly receive the invoice that you're going to generate? So that's another part of the financial management. As a contractor, you must send an invoice. Nobody's going to pay you unless you send an invoice first. And this is a complete contrast to being an employee, where you'll have a copy of an employment contract which says they're going to pay you, and that's all automatic. No. First step of financial management is you need to send an invoice. Going back to my first point now, we need to have enough personal funds so that we can continue living until that invoice is given to the customer, and then it's going to take some time for the customer to pay that invoice as well. So all in all, this could be up to 2 months. Your personal finances might take a bit of a strain on the first contract because you've got that 2 months to live for before you get any money. Now, despite this, you'll want to deliver the best service you can, and there will be distractions, and as I mentioned earlier, maybe you're dependent on certain things that could impair your performance. But I think as a professional provider of services, we will naturally want to do the best we can and do it in the best way. And always act the highest professional level that you want to. Let's deliver the best solution. Or if the customer doesn't want to pay for that best solution, at least the one that fixes their problem in the most efficient way. Now, the contractor lifestyle also includes some other things. Contracts, by their nature, are timed events. You might have as little as a 1-week contract or a 2-week contract. 3 months, probably a bit more normal. 6 months possible. Even 12 months are available if you find the right customer and they know and trust you. But on the shorter end of that, we know that contracts can be cut short. Customers change their mind. No fault of yours, no fault of theirs, but the upper echelons of the management of your customer have decided, yeah, we're going to change direction and therefore we don't need your services anymore. Or, I guess the best result, and this has happened to me on a couple of times, we've decided that the job you do is so valuable, we're going to replace you with 2 permies. I think that's a compliment, but I'm not sure. Either way, you need to be adaptable and flexible to those situations so that you can find a new contract. Comes back to your support network and perhaps the recruiting network that we built earlier to find the contract in the first place. On the other hand, because we're in IT, then stuff doesn't stay still either. New tools, new fashions, even new technologies. I'm old enough to remember that there was no internet, and then the internet came along. Imagine what a mind shift that was during my career. And so being able to adapt and be flexible, change from AWS cloud if you're a cloud engineer, you have to move to Microsoft maybe, or maybe back to AWS, or whatever the customer wants. Maybe both at the same time, if they're crazy enough to do that sort of thing. So being flexible is very important in order to continue your career. And that takes support. Support from your co-workers, your support network, trainers, maybe even have a coach, and your accountant to tell you how much money you've got and how much you can spend. All these people will help you along your journey in their own way. And as I mentioned before, stuff changes, so you will need to learn new stuff. You'll need to learn different stuff, or maybe just go into more detail. If you are in an AWS environment right now and you've got a customer and they want to migrate to Microsoft's cloud, maybe, some of the technology is identical, but they've got different names for it. So you'll have to go into more detail and upskill and relearn all the new words, even though it's the same fundamental stuff. But that's okay. We're flexible, right? And then we can look at the work-life balance, because ultimately we don't live to work, we work to live. And one of the choices of what made me decide to become a contractor is so that I can have that flexibility. When I wrote my first book, the one behind my shoulder here, Who Moved My Servers, I negotiated the option of taking a day out a week with my customer. And so that 1 day a week enabled me to have time in order to pursue a side project, in this case, write a book. So, in conclusion, where are you in your journey? Are you ready to step up and become a contractor? Does it sound like a fun thing that you'd like to do? Do you like the sound of the options that it'll give you? In that case, we need to make sure that you're not an employee, you are a contractor, and that's quite different. So you'll need to set up a company. You'll need to understand contracts and cash flow and compliance. And then ultimately, we'll be closing everything down nicely at the end so that you can have a glorious retirement. So are you ready? Come along and do our quiz, DevOps Contractor at scorecard.com, and that will ask you a few questions to help you understand where you are on your journey and where those gaps are. Just a couple of details, your name and email address, so we know where to send the report to. And then we can speak afterwards. You can get the option of booking a one-to-one with me, and I can discuss your options from there. As always, thanks for listening, and if there's any questions, put them in the comments below and we'll get back to you. Thanks very much, and I'll see you on the next one.